notoriously poor public speaker, so I figured if I started rambling incoherently, I would just kind of lean over and talk to Clint, because a man has to know his limitations. And I do. I was asked to participate in this speaking event, and I'm not sure what I had to offer. I've designed dozens of housing projects around the city of Denver, all through the area, but I've been, in fact, I'm working on one now downtown for the Mulhern Group, 314 apartments for Nichols Partnership, 2 blocks from Union Station, which hopefully will include a grocery store. I'm not allowed to tell you who that is yet, but it looks like it's getting off the ground, so I'm pretty excited. But I was asked to talk about the neighborhoods of Elyria-Swansea and Globeville. And that gave me some pause, because I've never done a project in those neighborhoods, and I didn't know much about them. My involvement in those neighborhoods was actually through the Urban Design Committee. I started getting involved in those areas through the Urban Design Committee with station area plans, and through that became interested in the I-70 EIS process. For those of you who don't know, the I-70 east of the Mousetrap is getting expanded, and the early work through CDOT was pretty distressing. So we got very involved in it as the Urban Design Committee, and I found that one of the fascinating things and what really got me excited were the neighborhoods and the neighbors. A lot of very active people in those neighborhoods working very, very hard to try and improve the areas. And what I found was that they're very, very difficult areas indeed. So I wrote this down, and I stared at it for a while, and I tried to figure out what I could possibly add to this conversation. And I thought perhaps I could put it in a little historical perspective, because I have lived here for a number of years. Okay, which one? Yes. When I first started school here in 1980, the Wazi Street Supper Club was one of the only places to eat downtown. We spent a number of evenings here complaining about our teachers, I'm sure, but also the work, and consumed more than a fair share of beers and pizzas in that place. But what's interesting about the picture is that if you stood there 20 years ago, you would be completely under an elevated, constructed viaduct. That viaduct drew people off the highway right into downtown, came right in off the second floor there, and so everything on the right side was totally boarded up. You would not have recognized it at all today. There was nothing behind it on the right side. I will point to it. Nothing at all behind it over here. This is all new, and the viaduct came right through here, and it literally came right over your head. This was not a place you went for fun. Like I said, it was the only reason we were there because it was the only place to eat downtown. This area, when I first moved here in 1969, was where the bums hung out. You did not go down here. My mother did not want me coming down here at all. Look at it now. I was reminded by a colleague recently that our Governor Hickenlooper purchased the building that he started working in for $1 a square foot. And that's probably pretty similar to what this area was purchased for. It's now worth $500 a square foot. So what is there about this? I think the real difference is the added value that comes to removing some of those infrastructural elements and bringing change to the areas. It's really a lot about added value. So what we see is over history that the cities change. They move into areas that are previously neglected. And so what I want to point out is that Denver County originally, because of the Poundstone Amendment, was totally landlocked. There was no ability for them to expand at all. Until they added DIA, which doubled the area of Denver, there was no place for them to go, which naturally meant that all of the expansion would go into areas that were undeveloped. The area of Globeville, you can see the lovely neighborhood of Globeville, was totally split up by 2 highways. The areas of Elyria and Swansea are to the east of there along the highway. And looking from an oversight map, what you see is There's Globeville, and you can see the housing kind of packing in there. You can see the railroads coming through. You can see the river coming through it, and I-70 just cutting right across it. The neighborhoods of Elyria and Swansea are really over here. The reason they're called Elyria-Swansea is because really they're part of the same neighborhood. But if you're in there, you know perfectly well that they are totally separate neighborhoods. And it's because of the railroads. The railroads just slice through this area, back and forth and through here. The housing that generally supported the industry in this area is typical to this. Cheap housing, close together, very few infrastructure, very little grading and drainage. This is very typical. The housing, the people that lived in these houses for years supported the industry. That industry typically was meat packing, smelters, slaughterhouses, and stockyards. Now a lot of those have gone away. Now they're being replaced with other lovely industries like Purina, Pepsi Bottling Company, a lot of building industries, and a lot of dump sites. It's still a very heavily industrial area. This was a shot taken by one of the neighbors a couple of years back, looking to the east and south towards Suncor Refinery, which those of you who are in the news know has also been doing a wonderful job of cleanup in our area. So it's very, very heavily industrial areas. So with that industry comes a lot of issues. Purina, this area is also downstream from the municipal Denver water treatment plant. And this right behind you, if you turned around, would be the Purina plant. I can tell you right now, it stinks. It smells a lot, and in a lot of times, it's not an area you particularly want to be in. Now, Purina has promised to clean up some of its air pollution, but I can tell you the neighbors who live next door to it are still waiting for a lot of that. When the highways were brought in, it further isolated those neighborhoods. And I've heard some people say that the elevated highways really aren't so bad, and at least you have access through them, but tell the people living in those houses that. If you walk through these neighborhoods, you're gritty, dirty, smelly, and it really shows from the highway pollution. To the north is the Excel Cherokee plant. Lovely way to wrap your neighborhoods. That also produces a fair amount of pollution, I'm sure. Also, they've got a lot of railroads. This is one of three major numbered streets that go through these neighborhoods in an east-west direction. All of those streets are cut off by railroads or the river. There is no way efficiently to get from Elyria to Swansea to Globeville at all. So there's a real disconnect in the ability to treat these areas as communities. And of course the elevated highway of I-70. Lovely if you live in the area. Granted, you can get through it, but I can tell you that the highway did not add value to these properties. The highway detracted from value to these highways or to these areas. Property values of this, in fact, the Elyria School is immediately adjacent to this highway. So it's within smelling distance of Purina and the highways. This is 46th Avenue. In fact, before the highway was built, that was the neighborhood boulevard going through those neighborhoods. So the question is, how can we add value to these neighborhoods in the same way that bringing the viaducts brought value down to downtown Denver? How can we really bring value to these neglected neighborhoods? To be honest, they do have a lot going for them. If you look hard, they're that close to downtown Denver. 2 miles straight down Brighton Boulevard, you get right to downtown. So they have immediate access to the highways too, of course, if you consider that a benefit. But a lot of the neighborhoods, or the people in those neighborhoods do consider that a benefit. It's only 2 miles from downtown. This actually overlooks the Asarco smelting site. This is one of the dirtiest sites in Denver. But talking about value, I mean, if we clean this up, and we're able to clean this up, what is the real value to this land? And the neighborhoods have a river running through it. The South Platte River actually does run through these neighborhoods, but trying to get access to the river from these neighborhoods is quite difficult. In fact, one of the only ways to do it is up from the south on the path. This is Heron Pond, natural area. It's pretty much bordering the north side of Denver, and it is a riparian environment. It does have herons, apparently occasionally, although I think there are some neighbors here who might question that. The interesting thing about this natural area is that it's fenced around by a sign that says no swimming, and please don't eat anything that you catch out of there. And I can tell you this is exactly downstream from that Asarco plant, so what's in the bottom of that pond is not something you want to be standing in or swimming in. This park, Northside Park, is not far from there, and it was created from a defunct municipal water plant. It is one of the highlights of the neighborhood, although some of those concrete structures in there are really heavily graffitied. It's not a well-used park, and again, a part of it, a major part of it, is because they don't have access. So the neighborhoods have a lot of challenges and some opportunities. The question is it realistic to create communities of the future here? I think the neighbors would say yes, it is possible, and they're fighting hard to make that possible. We think that the key to that is to adding value is starting with good planning, and that takes a lot of work. For the neighbors that work at this and try and improve their infrastructure, they go to meetings. The city backs up these meetings on top of each other, sometimes two in the same day, sometimes multiple meetings in a week. And it's the real activists in these neighborhoods who work hard to get things done. And surprisingly enough, things can get done. This was one of the things that we've been working on hard in the urban design community. The EIS process has been in the working stages for 9 years. They spent $19 million to expand the highway. And their solutions coming out of that was to leave it elevated in the same way that you saw those shots underneath the highway, but expand it to either the south or the north. To expand it to the south would have cut Purina off. Purina stopped that. So the city came into these neighborhoods and told them what they were going to do was expand it to the south, essentially running over their schools and more of their neighborhoods.